Hello and very warm welcome to the Rise interview, 60 minutes of big questions about the big stories from the news and beyond with fresh insight and critical analysis. I am Christian Ogodo. Thanks for joining us. Coming up in the next hour, after easing the lockdown restrictions in major cities to restart Africa's largest economy, Nigeria's federal government releases full guidelines detailing measures on how the gradual easing of lockdown will be effected. But we have seen a gross violation of these guidelines as Nigerians poured onto the streets in complete violation of the advisory that they should only leave their homes only if necessary and observe physical distancing. How tough has it been to enforce these guidelines, especially in the face of thickening hardship and the struggle for survival in the country? We'll speak to the chairman, the Federal Capital Territory Task Force Management Team, and the human rights activist. That's coming up in a moment. In the face of the dwindling resources, stretched finances, rising unemployment, deepening poverty caused by the coronavirus pandemic, this has given the Nigerian government reasons to ease the federally imposed lockdowns. In containing the virus, while certain business activities go on, the containment guidelines were released and the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 also provided implementation guidelines for a phased and gradual easing of the lockdown in key cities. But the lockdown relaxation rules have not been practically adhered to by Nigerians, such as including a compulsory wearing of face masks, social distancing, as well as constant washing of the hands. And the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 says the government may be compelled to reimpose the earlier lockdown.
The task force has been monitoring the level of compliance with some of the measures, and early observations showed lack of compliance with social distancing and wearing of masks or cloth coverings. We note particularly the chaotic scenes around the banks and other financial institutions. We must reiterate that the danger of infection is not over, and that individual actions will contribute to the success or failure of our measures.
I wish to start by reminding citizens that this new phase comes with an added responsibility to be extra vigilant and compliant with the accompanying measures and guidelines that are meant to assure that we do not lose the health gains we have made so far, while cautiously opening options for citizens to rebuild their livelihoods.
The challenge for us as a society is how do we now organize ourselves to mitigate this risk, to limit transmission from each other so that, yes, we might have a few extra infections today and tomorrow, but what we don't want is an explosion of new infections. If we do have that explosion, there will be almost no choice left for the leadership of the country than to ask all of us to go back into our homes.
Have now been joined by Attah Ikharo, who is the chairman of the FCT Task Force Management Team on COVID-19, and by Barrister TieTie, who is a human rights activist. Let's go straight to our offsite studios and let's get the views of Ikharo. Attah Ikharo, very warm welcome to the Arise interview. You want to tell us about some of the challenges your committee is facing, particularly when you were recently quoted as saying that the curfew even affects those designated as essential workers.
Yeah, thank you very much. Let me put this in clear perspective here. when you come out at night and you see the hundreds of cars, and I thank God that this evening, the SGF and the chairman of the PTF, Mr. Boss Mustafa, started his speech by making it very clear that one of the observations they got, very worrisome, is that after the curfew period, they have thousands of cars all queuing up at various police checkpoints. Where are all of these cars going to? What we saw at Gwarimpa was a situation 2 nights ago where we have so many cars in their hundreds, and all of them are largely uniformed personnel, medical personnel, and media personnel as well. And when you find out from all of them, not up to 5% of them are on real duty. Others of them consider the fact that their profession or their calling is designated essential duty, so they all come out on the road at night and want to move freely, even when some of them are just with wife, children, friends, and even with due apology to one of them we met, who told us that he's with his girlfriend, and he, as far as he's concerned, is on essential duty. So once that is done and not properly defined, then everyone on the first lockdown list will be coming out. And when they all come out at night, as they do, that led to the complaint you heard today from the PTF chairman. So if journalists are to come out, or those of them who are closing very late, which we understand, and newscasters, producers, and others, they should be given proper guidance, proper coverage, and the security men should allow them easy passage to go home. But when you have journalists as at 1, 2 p.m., like one that we saw, casually dressed on his shirt, not doing anything based on our judgment, that they are journalists just going around town, and we told them if the over 20,000 journalists in Abuja decides to go around town at night, then the curfew has failed. But in everything, there are modifications here, and we have also explained very clearly to the security men, if you are not on duty at night, even if you are in any uniform organization, please, we beg you in the name of God, we plead this time, stay at home and don't just be going out at night, so that the curfew will appear to be having effect. Because if all of us come out here, then with very few time, the curfew will be defeated.
Well, it looks, well, Attah, let me stay with you. You seem to be undermining certain fundamental rights of these people, because you've designated them essential workers. There was an incident on the first day of this curfew. The people on the airport road axis, and the road was totally shut down, and security men there asked these essential workers to go back to their offices. Is that what the curfew is supposed to be doing?
No, I think what you saw that very morning was really an intensive undercover operation. We slowed down the movement on the road, and if you follow through the news that day, we got a truckload, a full truckload of persons hidden in between bags of beans, about 23 of them being brought in from Zamfara State. We got one other truck as well that was also coming in from Osun. If we open the road wide, and many security personnel with due apology must have been badly compromised in those states, badly compromised along the road, when they are coming into Abuja, if we don't slow movement to filter those long travelers that have breached interstate movement ban, then what will we be doing? When we stop that, we got even the journalists who came there. So all of these persons who had breached the ban, we filtered them out and we turned them back to their individual states. That was what we did that day. Once we know that one was cleared, then we pulled out immediately at about 1 p.m. in the afternoon. At night, after the curfew, when we see excessive volume of vehicles, we always get them in their thousands at night. We slow down movement to check the genuine ones, allow them passage, the ones who just throw around and mix with the genuine people who are coming from work, like journalists and others. Those are the ones we keep and take to mobile court the next day.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know, I'm very familiar with Abuja, the Federal Capital Territory, and its nightlife is not, it's a sleepy public service town. So I wonder where those thousands of vehicles that, you know, defy the curfew are really coming from. I don't think they are within Abuja, whether they're going to the suburbs and the rest. But let me put... Okay, I want to quickly add this. The kind of intelligence that you got about people being transported from Ekiti, from Zamfara and the rest, we heard too that more than 80 motorcyclists from Kano State have entered Abuja. You want to quickly apprise us with the latest on that?
Yeah, I think that was the one we got yesterday morning when we took them, about 80 of them, and we had to turn them back to their respective state. It was very unfortunate, and that's what we keep asking ourselves.
Tell him to give me 4 back now.
In what we attempt, what will be like an indictment to every one of us, the enforcers, we were very shocked that these motorcycles, 54 of them, I think from Katsina State, 4 of them from Lagos State have been on the way for the past 4 days. Some of them from Kano, Kaduna, Niger State, made their way through almost to the heart of the city, just close to the airport. Now, we got them back with 2 vehicles that were fully loaded buses from Katsina State. And like what I told the people there, why we blame those who are traveling, the question we from the enforcement team must ask ourselves, how did they pass? The one from Katsina State have crossed through Funtua, crossed through Zaria in Kaduna State, part of Kaduna State, and got to Abuja, even crossed Abuja, and we are coming into the city, and we got them around the airport junction here. The ones that were coming from the south so the question we will ask, and we'll be asking going forward is, are we really serious? And thank God the SGF, the PTF chairman asked that today at the PTF briefing this evening. Are we really serious? If we must do this, security agents must start to do what is right across the whole state. For them to pass more than 30 checkpoints and get to where we are, I suspect high level of compromise.
Yeah, high level of compromise there. So did your task force just return them back? Did you test them for COVID-19? Are they the popular almajiris that some of these states are, ferrying to other states even away from their homes, like we're told? Very quickly, Attah.
No, they were not almajiris. They were Okada riders. Some of them were shoe shiners. The ones from Katsina were people who apparently said they have friends and relatives here. The one we even got a night before from Benue was coming to see her sister who gave birth and was coming with about a child or 2. What we did was to turn them back. When they are coming, they come in their thousands. So we couldn't text them. So we just leave them in their vehicle, in their Okada. We guide them with about 8 vans with heavily armed men out of Abuja, out after Zuma Rock, and ask them to go back while we come back. Some say that will not be so productive because they may likely sneak in at night. But from our conscience, we are doing what is right and what other security agents and personnel ought to have done in all of the states from where these persons came from.
Okay, thanks very much for that first part of your task as the chairman of the task force enforcement team. We're going on a short break now. When we return, we'll continue the interview, and I'll be talking to Frank TieTie. Stay with us. You're welcome back to the Arise interview with me, Christian Ogodo. We're live in Nigeria's capital, Abuja. Like a writer aptly puts it, after the relaxation of the lockdown, it was like prisoners were let out of their confinement for the first time in a long time. Both in Lagos and Abuja, people went out in large numbers. Bus stops, bank premises, and markets were flooded by people who came out en masse to seek their daily bread. Although there is visibly a high compliance with the government's directives on mask wearing, but not with physical distancing and personal hygiene, the same directives have been breached in many public places. And on the 3rd day of the easing of the lockdown in the Federal Capital Territory, the markets were opened for business, but compliance with guidelines is still an issue. As a Rise News correspondent, Chima Nwakwo with a report.
The relaxation of the restrictions on movement has come with some relief. The popular Wuse market appears to have rolled back to life, with motorists jostling for the inadequate parking spaces. People flock to the market to ensure they buy food within the 5-hour timeline fixed by the FCT authorities for markets to open on Wednesdays and Saturdays. It is rather curious that the guards aren't checking people's temperatures here, and there is no hand sanitizer in sight. By the gate, provision is made for hand washing, but it is not mandatory. There is also an issue. Only shops selling food and other provisions are allowed to open.
I don't know, the market management say we should not open, and the government say we should open two times in a week. And we are obeying the order. And today is our day to open the market and get what to go to eat. And the government, the market man say we will not open. That's the problem we have now. I don't have any money to feed ourselves.
Actually, we were here this morning and we are allowed to enter inside the market. Getting to the market, they said we should not open the shop. The instruction from the FCT minister said the shops should not open. Only those selling essential goods, just like food items and provisions and all that. But if you're not selling anything apart from that, you should not open.
The spokesperson of the Abuja Markets Management Limited explains.
Nothing has changed. Wuse Market has always been open to people who sell food items and other essential commodities for Wednesday, a day like this, and again on Saturdays from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. So nothing has changed.
The lockdown has weighed heavily on the personal finances of many. At this motor park, the taxis are glad to be back on the road. In loading their vehicles, they also keep to the physical distancing rules of the FCT.
Not really. We are not making profits, but at least we have to bear with what is happening now. What is happening now is for the meantime. It's something that will stop soon. So we will now go back to the way we used to do our work.
At these banks in Central Area and Maitama, not much has changed. The long queues witnessed when the banks first reopened have eased off, and at least there is observance of social distancing. Away from the banks, this shop isn't taking any chances as far as the rules of COVID-19 are concerned. Chima Wankwo, Arise News.
Thanks very much, Chima, for that report. Well, as I have with me Attah Ikharo, who, like I said earlier, is the chairman of the FCT Ministerial Enforcement Tax Team on COVID-19, and by Barrister Frank TieTie, who is a human rights lawyer. Okay, thanks for your patience, Frank. You've listened to the chairman of the COVID-19 Enforcement Task Force team. Did you sense some violations of the rights of the people, particularly the essential workers?
You know, we are in very, very trying times with a lot of discordant regulations and uncoordinated communication from the authorities. There is some semblance of confusion because we haven't been exposed this much. Our dysfunctionality hasn't been this much exposed. Our inability and inadequacy as a people and country have not been this, shown to us. Have not been this tested to the degree that it almost made our country prostrate. Now, here there is a mistake when you seem to exalt regulations above statutes and then above the Constitution. So first and foremost, you must appreciate the fundamental right of every Nigerian to freedom of movement. For you to restrict that movement, you don't just casually make a regulation, even though the president is empowered under the Quarantine Act to so make the first set of regulations that he did make. And those regulations, even though they came late, appear to be more useful and more relevant than this current confusing situation that we are in. I must thank my friend Ikharo Attah. He has been very spirited in the way and manner he has been carrying on his public duty. But that does not mean that the spirit of the law has been followed. It isn't, because we're talking about a disease for which Nigerians are being traumatized, a disease that they didn't cause, a disease that could have been prevented, a disease that they could have been prevented from being traumatized by. Now it is Nigerians just can't understand. Now let me tell you, under the principle of self-preservation, if you make Nigerians understand that there is a nuclear gas leak somewhere, and if you don't evacuate this moment, everybody here will die. That sense of self-preservation alone is a better law that would drive them to with a sense of safety. But you see, this approach of this draconian approach, this militaristic approach in, handing down, a law that must be obeyed, even though it's unenforceable. I see Attah very exasperated, even though he is facing a Herculean task, and so is the government. The government was just daring the citizenry when it was contemplating increasing the lockdown from 2 weeks. There is a necessity for a lockdown, by the way, but you needed to see the way the FCT managed the lockdown at the initial stage. Markets were not unnecessarily locked, people were not unnecessarily stopped. You are talking about Trade Dispute Essential Services Act, an act that defines what constitutes essential services. And you then make a regulations to say it is not your business to determine anytime whether what a law has decided as a trade dispute. You can now say, oh, your essential, what the law has decided as an essential service, you can now on your own say that no, because your essential services are not required in the night. That is completely wrong. It is not supposed to be contemplated. So we are missing a point when we fail to emphasize the need for safety, putting it in the hands of Nigerians themselves rather than giving it to policemen, that are already grappling with a very terrible, image of being the most corrupt institution in Nigeria. No, so we need to face it, that it is only when we come back to the point where you say a government is responsible to the people, and then when the people are beginning to feel the pain of what they don't understand, it becomes a real problem for the government to galvanize the people. But that's missing, and it's a problem.
But TieTie, in your opening remarks, you said these are very dire times, dire situations
for the people.
For the entire country.
No, for the people, because the people don't understand.
Excuse me, and even for the world, because of this strange virus that the world, is at a race to find a cure for. And you used, an analogy of a gas plant and talked about self-preservation. This is the preservation of the lives of Nigerians. And they say, look, we know the hardship inherent in being locked down because 70% of Nigerians are like itinerary traders, daily paid workers and things like that. Okay, we're going to ease it. Is it too difficult for adults like you and I to follow?
You must also commend the federal government for considering the peculiar situation of Nigerians by now initiating a palliative regime, which has its own questions. I'm also trying to get involved to see how we can improve it at our NGO level. But you see, the point is that there are some problems that can be avoided. I don't want to go into the fact that whether we have lockdowns or not, the virus will continue to infect Nigerians. That is a matter of fact. So the government can bring the argument that if we hadn't brought all of these measures, perhaps the situation would be worse. That's left to argument.
Should government allow the virus, to affect the people when it is constitutionally there that one of the major function of the government is to protect lives and property of the people?
What is apparently missing is an informed balance, an informed cooperation from the people, a disconnect in communication and in communicating the right message for the people to cooperate with what is going on. There is this, the people don't even understand, because we need to come out from law. Essentially, does not thrive on its ability to coerce.
Is it not why you lawyers say the law is an ass?
No. The law does make prescriptions, and because there is a presumption that what the law says is right, it's according to informed decision. That is why people are persuaded to obeying the law. It's not necessarily because the Nigerian police will arrest them. It's not because the mobile court will cause one form of hardship or the other. That's not the reason. People must be convinced in the goodness of the law and that they must see it as a natural and compelling obligation to obey it. But when you make laws and the people perceive, in this case, regulations that are made are pursuant to certain laws, and the people perceive that these laws are oppressive, how can you make life hard for me to earn a living? And then you tell me about a virus that I don't see, something that started in China, something that could have been prevented, you failed in your duty, and now you're making life hard for me? So the people must first of all understand that the government has an obligation to make life easy and not make life hard through lockdowns. And now Attah is talking about curfews that even affect essential duties. What are you talking about?
Well, it's in checking movement and the spread of the virus. Look at the summary it gave about people, you know, sneaking into the Federal Capital Territory, even with Okada in trucks carrying produces.
Those were the ones they found. What about the ones they did not see? Now, whether or not, first of all, I need to address that very important poser. Whether or not you impose these hardships, this lockdown, there has always been an increase, a dramatic increase. From the first time, the first case we had here, in about a month, we saw a dramatic increase. We're not talking about thousands. So there needs to be an explanation. So we need to look at the fact that some of these draconian laws just are not working.
Okay, Frank, let's stop here for now because we're going to take some messages. When we return, we'll continue the interrogation of the issue at hand. Stay with us. You're welcome back, and you're still watching the Arise interview with me, Christian Ogodo. Thanks for staying with us. I still have in the studios Ikharo Attah, who is the chairman of the FCT Task Force Enforcement on COVID-19. And I still have the lawyer, Frank TieTie, here with me in the studio. I know, Ikharo, you would want to respond almost immediately to some of the issues, you know, brought up by Barrister Frank TieTie. But I have a question here too. Why do you have too many cooks, you know, kind of spoiling the broth? We heard from some of those traders, I think in Wuse Market, saying, we know the presidential task force said we should open. The market management is saying, no, they shouldn't open. What is the real situation? There are 2 days or so, or 3 days window in a week for markets to open in the FCT. Why do we have these counter orders?
It's a counter order. It's not a counter order. Let me start from there. Because it was very clear how the market had operated. The market had been operating 2 days, and in those 2 days in a week, those in the informal sector, those who sells groceries, provisions, as well as pharmaceutical, are allowed to open in the market. The other ones who sell clothes and jewelries are not allowed to open. So we are maintaining that based on the directive of the FCT minister for the next 2 weeks, starting from on Monday. And if you watch the speech given by Boss Mustafa, I don't think it's discordant. He said the state governors or government and the FCT minister and administration should decide how their markets should operate and the days for their market. And that was very clear. The other traders who came there were expecting to actually sell. That did not work, and some of them got angry. Now, coming to what Barrister Frank TieTie said, I think the first thing we must take from Barrister Frank TieTie, which I think I want to appreciate from him, is the genuineness of the feeling and the intention to get the system working. I appreciate that very strongly, because if we look at the whole thing, the way it is going, we must all understand there is the need for a national cohesion. Let me give you that. A pastor called me and told me that when I go to a church to actually get them to stop this large gathering, I should not talk to them. I should just arrest any pastor and go, that he doesn't like me preaching to them. And I told him, before you arrest somebody, I'm not a lawyer, but I think it's appropriate to convince him in the language he will understand before you now pet him to even come with you. Than this draconic act of you are under arrest, you handcuff the person, you drag the person. For me, I think that is barbaric. That's why at every point we go to, there is this explanation, this plea, this trying to carefully take you out of the wrong you're doing. I think also, like what he raised, we are doing what we feel. and what we have been told is right by the PTF. Now, if we go out at night, those who are on essential duty, in quote, as they claim, we don't arrest them. We don't. But the sad thing, which they also must understand, is that we got many persons who ought not to be on the road. Now, when all of this, the essential and the non-essential, gets to the road, we must filter the genuine ones who are on essential and the ones who are not. That's on the one side. Then on the other side also, let me add this, because I have raised that and I think it's appropriate for us to understand that during the lockdown, before it was relaxed, one of the most essential people that we needed, which I raised and I argue over, are the lawyers, not patronizing Frank TieTie here, because we had mobile courts and lawyers were not on the essential list, in quote, as were given to us. And I told some persons at the mobile court that we needed lawyers to defend some of these persons. And on a few occasions, I had call from some lawyer friends who came to see some client, and many thanks to the Legal Aid Council and others who came in to defend some persons at this mobile court. Wonderful. We had mechanics. Most of us who are on essential duties, our cars were breaking down. And mechanics were coming, and this man we are saying mechanics. I said, no, who fixed all the broken down cars on the road? So I think as we go through law, I believe, like what someone told me, you look at the law from the lenses of humanity and how it will apply. But by and large, despite how hard Frank TieTie had appeared, if you look at the underlying tone, it is for us to get the system working. And I raised that clearly. For instance, we are enforcing. As we speak now, what he raised, you find hundreds of cars coming in. The question is, the law enforcement officers, are they enforcing?
Ikharo, Attah, you're looking at the Federal Capital Territory as just, being pigeonholed. You forget that a lot of the inhabitants of the FCT live in satellite towns, and they form, you have some of them forming part of the essential workers. But let's quickly take you on security, where quite a number of incidents of robbery, armed robbers taking advantage of the lockdown and the curfew and still able to rob people, carry out their heinous crimes and the rest. And of course, we've heard of some overzealous security personnel being excessive in their actions and rest. How do you address this?
If you watch us, I thank to Mr. Frank TieTie and yourself there. I'm proud to tell you one thing, and I'll tell you, not because I am leading the team, but I'm proud to tell you that in the FCT, we have not fired a bullet. Even if you hear people being killed, we have not fired a bullet. That's why most time you see us doing more of talking, more of appealing. We have not fired. Yeah, in many states of the country, we've seen that, we've seen abuses, we've seen molestation, but in the FCT, we have not fired a bullet. And for us, that is a success story. Not even a tear gas have been fired, because we held the men and told them, you must respect the dignity of persons and also have regard for humanity. So that one is aside. The issue of robbery at night, we have always been seeing that so much here. And for us as a people, maybe some social problems here, because when there's a lockdown and there is no revolving fund and the economy is not growing as it should, then persons will get a little bit worried. Will you permit me to talk about the border closure as it affects satellite towns?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that one is something I raised. And I raised that, understanding it at several fora, and I have told any person who tried to understand that if you want to have anything like a curfew, and you want to have it a curfew or a lockdown or whatever, successful in the FCT, two local governments are very key and cardinal. One is the the local government of Suleja in Niger State, and the one of Karo in Nasarawa State. These are heavily populated areas where most persons are living in the Maraba, the Masaka, the Ado, the one-man village, stretching towards Kefi, towards Aotaba Alefi. At the Suleja axis, we have the Madala, some part of Suleja, and some part of Tafal. I told persons whom I advised, let us look at the border, not within the territorial border, but within the social and human border. Everyone down to Masaka every morning heads into the FCT. And even most of the barracks, most of the quarters of this, our civil servants in the FCT are in that area. Can't we look at it from that point that we should relax so that people will not suffer so much coming into town? Many persons disagree with me, and I told them, you are only buying time, because those who work there must come to work. And what now happened, which I also raised at a larger event that involves many security agencies, is that look at what happened at Nyanya. Vehicles will come closer, they stop, hundreds or thousands will cross with their leg and enter and move because the traffic time is so congested. I think in all of this, one thing I have learned as a journalist turned enforcement officer is to say things the way they are and always make people know that life is dynamic and we can be changing, and we must learn also to understand on the ground of empathy what people go through on the road. If people are coming to work from Nasarawa State and Niger State and they get so clogged, I don't think it's right.
Okay, Ikharo, thanks very much. Frank TieTie, the issue of security, the issue of high-handedness, he just said that at least they are proud that the security operatives here in enforcing the lockdown have not fired a bullet. But we hear of, you know, occasional brutalization and the rest.
You know, there is no doubt about the refinement that Attah has brought into this whole thing. But I think the problem is that he is being overburdened. So the questions that should be addressed to the Inspector General of Police have been addressed to him. He doesn't take responsibility for the action of the policemen on the road.
Of enforcement.
No. Enforcing what? COVID-19 prevention or whatever the regulations that the president has.
The measures put in place to be adhered
So he is not a policeman. He is enforcing certain regulations. Yet, he may have, and the police may not necessarily be under his directive. He may make his prescriptive behavior to the policeman. And from my own personal experience, the police, especially the ones on the major roads of Ahmadu Bello and Murtala Mohammed and Robert Macaulay, they've conducted themselves in very civil manner.
Very.
But you see, we are a country that is under police as well. A lot of things happen. You cannot, create an abnormal situation of usually a city, a once bustling city, suddenly becomes very silent and ghostly. It becomes a security problem in itself. Excuse me.
All right.
So it is important that the law enforcement be further increased for the FCT. The capacity of those who are saddled with providing peace and security should be increased. Now, with regards to Ikharo Attah's committee, I would have expected greater empowerment in the area of communication, because the civil populace hardly understands what is going on. I can tell you that. And if they do understand it, they will be the ones who will even enforce the need for themselves to stay alive. Now they see it as a kind of government oppression against them.
A double jeopardy?
It's a form of violation of rights. Many of them come to me and say, look, is this right that we cannot go to work? If they give recommendations of social distancing and we are obeying them, why should they not impose a curfew? So what we really need is public education coming from a committee like Attah's own, for the purpose of making the people to be more self-aware of the need to preserve themselves, much more than the government. The government cannot love the people more than themselves.
But it's the government's responsibility to, preserve the lives and property of the people.
You see, government cannot micromanage people's lives, and that's why we have the right to privacy. Government cannot tell people where to go and where not to go. Government is just an entity within the state. It's very important that we restrict government powers, because those who run government would want to always have their way with the least resistance. Whereas what ought to be is that those who run government ought to think out of the box within the confines of the law without affecting the liberties of the people, yet carrying out welfare programs that will improve the life of the people. So when government has that kind of difficulty, so it's important that we restrict government. Government needs to be restricted.
All right, gentlemen, we'll go on another short break, and when we return for the concluding part, you'll be given some measures that can be taken, to observe the lockdown. You're welcome back to the Arise interview with me, Christian Nogodo. We're live in Nigeria's capital, Abuja, as they have here in the studio. Frank TieTie is a lawyer and a human rights activist, and in the offside studio is the chairman of the FCT COVID-19 Task Force Enforcement Task Force. Ikharo Attah is also a journalist. Okay, Ikharo, in another 10 minutes before we round up this program, you want to tell us what new creativity are you going to bring into, ensuring that the people of the Federal Capital Territory follow the rules and regulations, the measures in curtailing the spread of the COVID-19?
Thank you very much. And I think what most of us are saying as we cross-pollinate idea is very key and cardinal here. The issue of advocacy have so much been talked about, although I and my people are not meant to be a team that is a media team for intense advocacy. I think they got so many media team on COVID-19 on that, but we try as much as possible to engage in advocacy, talking to people wherever we meet them and try to explain to them going forward. I agree very strongly. Advocacy is key. Human beings are homo sapiens sapiens. You must convince them and talk to them and keep doing that. And when they have diverse opinion, you must also listen to the opinion and let the majority as well have their way. And I believe within the period here, the innovation that will be coming on are diverse. Most of them will be, with due apology if that offends, as situation turns out. For instance, we talked about quarantining or keeping everyone who comes into Abuja in isolation. And sadly, we discovered that these persons who are coming in are in hundreds of thousands. And what we are doing in the new innovation is to turn them back, because government cannot feed them for 14 days. Government cannot keep them in most of the schools, as some persons are recommended. I said because they will abuse those areas, and some will not even leave subsequently after. I believe strongly the innovation that we also need is to listen to some of the diverse voices that may not be telling us what we want to hear, like that of Barrister TieTie. We must open our ears to all diverse view here and also engage the people, particularly those in the civil society as well as the non-governmental organization, and also going forward here, enforcement officers, those who break the law, those who collect bribes, those who compromise must be brought to book. Yes, the SGF mentioned that today, very worried about suspicion of compromise, but I think we must be very firm on those who enforce the law that they do not compromise.
And the markets and public transports, have they been doing as you stated in the guidelines? Are you satisfied with the taxis and the minibuses in the outskirts of the city center?
Now, let me tell you something that will shock you. I think I'm beginning to love the civil populace, and I will say this without my saying words here. You see, on Monday when we came, we met people carrying 2 in front and 4 behind, which is a wider, very offensive contravention. And you know this sad thing? Most of them that we saw are uniformed personnel. That's the sad thing. They are the ones using their car for kabu and are overloading it. Those who are in civil populace here, the highest I see them carry is 3 at the back and 1 in the front. And all of them got face masks. And I commend them for that. And I believe very strongly here, that of the market, I think we'll be meeting whenever the minister calls us to review it. We'll review the days upward, and gradually we'll be unlocking it. The marketers, for me, they have made sacrifice. I've commended them. I've talked to them in the market, Wuse Gariki, Utako market, even Yanya market, and Dusi Alhaji. I've appealed to them for greater understanding here. But I also believe, with due apology, I've said that before from the beginning, even during the full lockdown, most of those we arrested as taxi drivers during the full lockdown, we are uniformed personnel. Very sad, my brother, very sad.
Really sad indeed when those who are supposed to be enforcing the law are breaking it. Frank, what are your thoughts on how government can further mitigate, the lockdown without so much pain, stress, and obeying, the laid down measures?
I think government should come up with its homegrown approaches to these matters. It is not just accept
but they are there.
Recommendations from the international organizations which are applicable to other countries and may not necessarily be applicable here. You don't just recommend total lockdown in Nigeria. And then you expect that without considering that we don't have a proper social security system. Now, I have been watching international news channels like Arise News and others in the last few days. And I've seen that other countries are bold enough to say, we are not imposing lockdown. Let the virus take its course. And you see, there's this wrong impression that getting the virus automatically means death. No. So, I heard the NCDC Director General talking yesterday that data is key in the fight against this disease. So we need to understand that who are those being affected? Is there a possibility that the virus can actually run its course in Nigeria without actually killing people the way it did in other parts of the world like Europe and America? Can the government afford this expensive approach of locking down and then this misunderstood measures that it is being taken? I mean, it's taking, even law enforcement officers don't even understand them. So wouldn't the government have to sit down and begin to listen to other Nigerians, like Ikharo is saying? That, take for example, Professor Morris would say that I have a cure to this virus, and you wouldn't see the kind of patronage that the American government is giving to other African countries who have made certain assertions about that coming from the Nigerian government. So we need to sit down and ask ourselves the question: do we because why real fear is that, let us not, you mentioned it, double jeopardy. Let us not suffer an economic hardship that will now be difficult to recover from when in the wake of this dwindling oil resources, and then we also still have a viral attack, a pandemic sweeping across the country. So in Sweden, for example, the government has refused to impose a lockdown and has said life should go on as normal, and the people must do everything they can to protect themselves. And they have seen a dramatic reduction in the infection with the way from the way it started. So that is a country,
because they are obeying the measures put in place. Because
they took time to understand how the virus will affect them, considering their social-cultural and economic issues. But in our country, our scientists need to come and make recommendations to our president. We don't have that. The recommendations shouldn't come from WHO alone. They shouldn't come from all international institutions alone. We want local persons, local institutions that are being funded by government money to make research and give recommendations that are homegrown, that are local, that will bring tangible results, and not these ones that we don't understand. Nigerians don't understand them. Those that have been asked to enforce them, policemen, for example, don't understand them. The populace, they are finding it difficult. They misunderstand them. They think that the government is against them. Government has a lot of work to do.
A lot indeed. Okay, finally, let's go to the offsite studio now. Attah, in just about a minute, I want you to wrap up, because your committee and the FCT administration got a lot to do. Attah?
Yeah, we've got a lot to do, and we'll be doing it going forward here. We take directives and we enforce them. We appeal to residents for greater understanding at moments like this, and I want to use this medium to appeal to persons across states to please understand. Let them stay where they are so that we check and we don't move the virus. And for those who are enforcing the law, sorry, I may sound very hard on them. Please do not collect bribe. Ensure that you do what is right. We can fix Nigeria.
Indeed, I like the very optimistic note there. We can indeed fix Nigeria, and nobody will fix it for us but we ourselves. Thanks so very much, Ikharo Attah. He is the chairman of the FCT Enforcement Task Force on COVID-19. And Barrister Frank TieTie, a lawyer and human rights activist. Thanks for joining us on the Arise interview. Well, that's it for this edition of the Arise interview. Do join us again tomorrow from me and the entire team here in Abuja. Goodbye, and thanks for watching.